Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. We're going to talk about resolutions today. That's a continuation of part of what we learned with opening speeches, and hopefully we all have a great educational and informative time. Okay, so resolutions is the writing part of Model UN. It's where we take the different things we talk about and we make them concrete. This is helpful and useful on multiple levels. And I would say that even if you don't write well, don't worry. It's better to write a sentence as best you can and then have someone else edit it and work on refining it than having someone else write for you. So I would say my first recommendation is always be part of the writing. You don't need to be amazing at writing. Most of us don't start off that way. But when someone writes for you, they have the power of the pen. And I've seen many committees where the fear of writing resulted in people who weren't such great speakers and not such great negotiators being the ones to decide in the end what was going to happen because they were the ones who wrote while other people didn't feel confident enough. So it's better to write in some form than not at all. So what is this writing thing we speak of? So today we're going to talk about MUN draft resolutions. This is a shorter version of the workshop if people would like. I will share a article like at length in the chat at the end of this. And obviously people are welcome to see, there's probably videos online where I did this, with more time. So part one, content, what is a UN resolution? And then to writing and draft resolutions and types of clauses that I would say is the more important part. So who here, before we jump into this, who here knows something about resolutions? If your camera's off, please use your hand. Like who here knows the parts of a resolution? Okay. For who is this Chinese? Who has never heard any of this before? Raise your hand if you don't know what a resolution is. Okay, there are a few of these, a few of those. Okay, if we turn on their cameras, that'll be wonderful. Okay, so okay, fine. So we're gonna go through the basics of what is a resolution. Apologies to those who already learned this, and then we'll go into clauses. All right, so what is a UN resolution? Let's have Zimbabwe from Shoham. Can you please read?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Resolutions are written decisions of a UN committee. These decisions are instructions that are then carried out by the same UN committee or by UN member states.
Wonderful. Please keep going.
Resolutions allocate people, resources, and money to put towards whatever the UN committee decides needs to be done.
Wonderful. Let's have Noam Ecosoc, India. Can you please read the next slide?
Yeah, okay. What is a draft resolution? Before a UN resolution passes with a majority of votes or it fails, it is a draft resolution until the document is still a draft.
Okay, wonderful. So, looking at what we've seen here, resolutions are the written decisions of a UN committee. The UN committee decides what they want to do, then they write it out for bureaucrats somewhere else to carry these things out. That's why these are written instructions, not always the discussion, but the final outcome. This can allocate the UN's resources. The UN is a very big organization with lots of money, lots of people, and this can be put towards whatever the UN wants to be done. Now, these are resolutions. UN resolutions decide what to do for a different committee. They decide, let's say, these boxes should be taken to a fish farm, okay? 7 boxes should be taken to a fish farm on Friday, November the 22nd. Okay, let's say the UN decides that. That's a resolution. But in Model UN, we don't talk about resolutions. We talk about draft resolutions because we work on the resolution in MUN until the vote is passed. Once it becomes a resolution, no longer a draft, then it's done. We did it. We have succeeded in our part. As the diplomats talking amongst ourselves, it's our job to get the resolution as far as possible. to pass it with majority vote, and then the actions that take place there that are written get carried out in the real world. Okay? So that's why in Model UN we call them draft resolutions and not resolutions. Once they pass, they are resolutions. But at that point, that already moves on to the office that carries it out instead of the diplomats who work together to come up with the solutions. All right? Are there any questions so far?
I do have one.
All right, yes, what's
You talked about giving boxes to fishing plants. Like, other than the actual when it happens and what happens, do we need to say like, oh, how do they transport the materials and stuff like that? How detailed?
yes, 100%. It's all about the details. Model UN is about details. The more detailed, the better. Remember, someone who doesn't know you and wasn't in the room is going to be carrying this out. All right, draft resolution. So now we're getting into what's in a draft resolution. All right, the draft resolution is a UN document made up of multiple clauses. Each clause is a separate idea, or each idea is a separate clause. Okay? A clause is a specific section within a written binding document, like a rent contract. I don't know how many of you have dealt with rent contracts, but let's say one of them says, what happens if a pipe breaks? What happens if furniture is damaged? When should the key be returned? Who is in charge of, paying the vad. Now, these are all separate things, all important, but separate ideas. I can pay the vad and not clean the floor. I can do both, but if a pipe breaks, I can decide that the landlord's in charge. So each one is a specific section. That's why if you write now, Singapore and who? What is one of your topics?
We have fighting a non-antibiotic world, like the super bacteria.
Okay, fighting super bacteria. We can send, cures, pills, drugs to places they're infected. We can also do more research in a lab. We can also make awareness workshops to people in areas to know don't hang out in the swamp. They have mosquitoes there. All three of these are separate ideas which can be developed, but should not be in the same clause because they're all different things. Okay? Clauses are the written calls to action of multiple delegates. If you remember calls to action, if you were in the last workshop on speeches, call to action is the how part of your speech. It's the detailed part. So that detail plus more detail. If you're going to write a position paper, the policy section of the position paper where you write your proposal, that would be much closer to what is in a resolution than the call to action part of your speech. Remember, when we speak, it needs to be, like Malcolm Gladwell says, convey brilliant ideas in 8th grade English. You need to be understood. That's what's most important. People do not speak with big words. People speak with simple and clear words. That's why your opening statement and your written part of your position paper should be quite different. But if you're going to do both, or for those who will do Model UN in other places with position papers, the position paper will be more like what you have in the resolution than what you say in your opening speech. Each clause clearly defines the responsibility of each party under the terms of the document. Often it's the UN, but not always. Okay? That means that each clause should say who is responsible to do what. And to answer the question we were just asked, this is with detail. So if we say the World Health Organization is going to bring a group of researchers and then another group of, Peace Corps volunteers who are going to administer cures, we know who we're talking about. All right. So this is the question on the nature of clauses. Any questions on this? Wonderful. All right, we will continue. When do we write a draft resolution? This is pretty easy. So if anyone wants to just yell out the answer. When do we write a draft resolution?
The moment the first session starts.
Okay, so, well, Asaf is absolutely correct. When do we officially start writing the draft resolution? All right, just call it out. Open your mic and say. I can't. USA, who, Sagi, did you want to say, or just picking your hand up? All right.
Well, usually just the third session after all of the just state wants to finish talking.
Okay.
While and usually in the open like rock everyone open area open times where everyone talks and walks.
Okay, yes, Italy.
Usually after all of the countries understand each country's idea of what you need to do about the topic, usually at the first unmod.
There we go. That's what I was looking for. During the first unmod, there's a
I
procedural.
forgot that word.
Yes, it's all right. You won't forget it by the end of this conference. Okay, so unmod, which is short for what?
Unmoderated caucus.
Beautiful. Draft resolutions are written during the unmoderated caucus. Okay? You can, as Asaf pointed out, start writing them the second opening speeches have begun, but to work on them with others, unless you are, colluding prior to the committee starting, then they're written during the unmods. This is the Model UN flow of debate. You can see here roll call, opening statements, the general speakers list, mod and unmod, circle. During the unmods, when you have time to freely negotiate. This is why teamwork is so important, because if you are writing, that means that you are not negotiating with others. So make sure you work with people that you could potentially trust and eventually will trust, because while you can take turns, you can't be writing forever. And if you're writing, you're missing out on other important things happening. Double delegations work a little bit differently, but that's, there it's already a different consideration on how you do teamwork to make sure both are equally, active. So unmod is by the way, for those who don't know and they're new to Model UN, the unmoderated caucus is free movement time to build coalitions and start writing draft resolutions. So that's when you get out of your seat and talk to people like people. And this is where, diplomatic language is, I'd say more like cocktail diplomacy, where you can talk during lunch, you can talk during the evening social. There's no rule that it has to happen exactly in committee in a formal way. It's up to you. We're interacting with people because people are going to vote. And in the end, they're going to vote for you because you work together and that's what they decide to do. Okay, any questions before we jump into the content of resolutions? Okay, seeing none.
Daniel,
Yeah.
could you explain, please? Like, it's simply, I know the answer, but like, I really want the delegates to hear your explanation because it was wonderful when I first heard it. The connection, because the resolution is not only operative clauses, it's also the preambulatory clauses. Okay.
That's the next section where we're going to talk.
Oh, okay.
We didn't get that. This is not the end of the slideshow. This is the end.
And their connection, like
Yes,
it's
yes,
important.
of course.
And what comes first? Okay.
We'll get through it all. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I'm glad that what Bronya asked is the next section. So the content, types of clauses, structure, content formatting, and more. Okay. So UN resolutions have two types of clauses: preambulatory clauses of why we're doing it, and operative clauses, how we're going to do it. Okay. And the reason it's how is because it's about the details. What you're going to do can usually be written in a sentence. Our clash is one sentence. But in the operative clauses, it's in more detail, so it's how. If your answer is not how, and you don't feel that you answered how, your clause does not have enough detail. All right, let's talk about the two types of clauses. Preambulatory clauses, why we're doing, and operative, how we're going to do. I'm going to start with operative clauses because actually, I guess I'll be asking Bronya, are all committees doing preambs?
Sorry?
Are all committees doing preambulatory clauses?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Because otherwise the resolution is not full.
True. I just have some
Okay, because
will write the preamble. Okay. The operative clause is the more important part because that's your action plan. Okay. Why you're doing it doesn't make a difference if what you're doing is not significant. So have your operative clause and then work backwards for your preambles. Okay. So operative clause, what we're going to do. The operative clause is a specific instruction of how your plan is going to work. Operative clauses should be detailed and be as short or long as needed. And this is where I'm saying that they should not be too short or too long. Now, let's see how this works. In an example, we're going to take an idea and turn it into an MUN clause. And through this, I want to show you all why, or I would say how non-formal UN language, normal speak, can be transformed. Okay, so let's say right now we're talking about North Korea's nuclear proliferation, a very, common topic to deal with, especially if you're in an ambassador program. So Clause idea example. North Korea can't buy or sell food. Do we all understand this? Shake your head, pick your hands up. Great, we all understand this. This is pretty simple. You know why? Because it's a clear idea in normal English. We understand. North Korea can't, should not be allowed to buy and sell food. We can even say this could have been written even a slightly more detailed way and we wouldn't have a problem. So let's go over the rules. Operative clause needs to do the following. The first word of each clause must be an operative phrase. We'll explain what that is in a second. In italics, that's where it leans to the right. Operative clauses start with a number and end with a semicolon. Okay, so these are the operative clause rules. Preambulatory clauses have slightly different rules we'll get to shortly. Okay, operative phrases, which is the first sentence, the word or words, is a verb that has legal meaning. For example, calls for, demands, endorses, encourages, notes, recognizes, a whole list of words. I will also at the end of class post the list of words in the chat so you guys have them. And I'd say write your sentence in normal, whatever you understand, and look for the right word later. Don't start by looking for the word. Write your idea clearly. Can't buy or sell food, and then go from there. Okay? So what are we going to do about the issue? The operative clause gives us a whole vocabulary. Do we approve? Do we call for? Do we encourage? Do we welcome? Do we regret? You know, all of these are possibilities. So here we have an operative clause about an operative clause. Let's have someone read. Let's go with China Echo Sock. Please read this clause about a clause.
Requires that the first word of each clause must be an operative phrase. A, that the first word be italics, semicolon. B, start with a number. C, end with a semicolon.
Wonderful. Okay. We're going to get back to you in a second for more reading, but first, see the rules we talked about with clauses over here, used in a clause. We see a number. We see it all finishes in semicolons. The word requires is part of the list. There's a number, there's subclauses, and they all end in semicolons. All right, so that already took the same rules and put it in the format that we recognize. Okay, China, please read the following clause.
Decides that North Korea can't sell seafood and that UN members can't buy seafood from North Korea.
Beautiful. All right, so that's the same idea, using the word in the beginning, adding UN members, and adding a semicolon in the end. It's barely more words and it looks much more official. Now, if we decide we want to add extra details to really, clarify it and knock it out, we can elaborate a little bit more. And China, one last time, please.
Decides that North Korea shall not sell seafood and that UN members states shall not prohibit the purchase of seafood from North Korea by their citizens.
Beautiful. Thank you, China. So we can see here, this, by the way, is a real UN clause. So we can see how things went from the initial idea of North Korea can't buy or sell seafood to the same thing elaborated, and then adding a few more words, shall not, prohibit, purchase, some words that we'd use later on, suddenly turns it into an actual clause. Okay, so that's the basics of clause. Clear idea, no extra words or minimal extra words telling us what to do. Okay, we can add subclauses and so on. Now, before we move on, I want to talk for a drop about what not to put in a clause. Okay, and that means no adjectives and no explanations. All right, can someone tell me what an adjective is? Anyone? Just unmute yourself.
Just something like a word to describe something or its aspects.
Beautiful. Excellent. So yes, we don't want words that describe things. This is a language of clear and concise communication. So Do not use adjectives or emotional language. Example, the World Health Organization should provide 50 milligrams of naloxone to the depressed fentanyl addicts. The word depressed is an adjective which should not be there. Okay, because it doesn't matter that they're depressed. If they're addicts and we're looking to help heal them, this is something that we should do. All right. Now, it can be very tempting to use, these types of words, and we can definitely see that there can be some type of appeal. But this is why I'm pointing out that when we get there, don't describe. Describe in clear action. Don't describe in words that are meant to elicit emotion. Let's see another example. Who would we like to have read? New Zealand, from the World Health Organization.
Adjectives and explanations. Do not explain why. A clear clause answers the why question. Example, the World Food Program will send 240,000 tons of food to North Korean people to end the years of starvation and malnutrition.
Perfect, beautiful. Okay, so see here that do not explain why, as New Zealand said. We want to give a clear answer to the clause will explain that. If the World Food Program is saying 240,000 tons of food to North Korean people, assuming that, we had a good debate and this is what's agreed on to do with the food, then we can guess that they're starving because the world is prioritizing them. To end the years of starvation and malnourishment is a why. Now, the why shouldn't be in the operative clause. Can someone tell me where does the why go?
In the sub-clauses, right?
In the preambulatory clause.
Oh, yeah.
Before. We should. Awful and terrible. And that's why, and then because of that, the World Food Program will send 240,000 tons of aid. All right, let's have, actually, we're going to have, where's our good friend from, let's go with Nigeria from who? Okay. You can please read the next slide just to, again, see the difference of how adjectives are needed. Okay, ready? Please read the following clause.
Decides that North Korea can sell really yummy seafood and that UN member states, whether rich or poor, shall prohibit the purchase for hard-earned money of healthy seafood from the North Korea by their citizens.
Beautiful. Okay, so we see here that it's the same clause, except now there are a bunch of other things which may add some flavor, but they don't really give additional information. Whether rich or poor doesn't really add that much. For hard-earned money or healthy seafood. Okay, so the use of adjectives drill we're going to skip just because we don't have so much time, but normally when I give this as a class, we look at some clauses and try to identify which ones are adjectives and what should be kept out. Okay, as I said before, operative clauses need clarity and detail because UN bureaucrats are going to carry them out and they're not going to be here as part of the discussion. All right, so to wrap up for operative clauses, write out your action as clearly and linearly as possible. Add the word in the beginning, add the semicolon, and then wrap it up. Eventually you can elaborate, add subclauses, which I will talk about now. Subclauses can be places where you add A or one or B or all these different things to add additional information useful to the clause. For example, if we're going to not supply seafood, we can say what seafood includes and what agriculture includes and so on. So there are ways to elaborate it. Sometimes you'll have a multi-stage plan. We're going to stop the sale of seafood in November. We're going to not let people buy seafood from December. Additional seafood sales will be fined to the buying country, ABC. So that's like we learned from the call to action. So that's something which also can be helpful. The key is that one clause should be a standalone idea. Everything to do with selling and buying seafood should be in clause 9. If we're talking about right now, peace talks or disarmament plans, that's not clause 9 anymore. But everything that has to do with seafood and things related to it is in clause 9, should all be put there. Okay, so that's operative clauses. This is why if you find that another clause in the draft resolution depends on a previous clause and knocking out clause 2 now makes clause 6 irrelevant, that shouldn't happen. They should be connected. At the same time, if you see two very different ideas, even here, by the way, you could decide that instead of supplying, buying, and selling food items, we want to separate seafood from agriculture. Maybe these clauses can be separated. So look critically on what can be combined, what can be separated, and what is duplicated. You will often find that other resolutions in the committee can be saying the same things as yours, and you usually find only one or two clauses that you disagree on. And that's where the debate's going to be, and that's why you want those clauses to be yours. Okay, we're moving on to preambulatory clauses. Why we are taking action. So preambulatory clauses have different rules. Let's have, who can read us some rules? Let's go with India. Who? Please tell us what our rules are.
Should I just read what's written?
Yes.
3 types of preambulatory clauses. 1. Information on the specific case. 2. A legal right. 3. Supporting materials, past documents, quotes, etc.
Okay, wonderful. So for your preambulatory clause, number 1 is case-specific information. Whoever, thank you. All right, actually, keep reading, Laura.
Case-specific information is used to show the basic details about the situation the MUN committee is discussing. The clause does not tell us what to do, but does tell us what is going on.
Wonderful. So usually this clause can be written by one delegate and apply to many. However, this does not at all mean that everyone in the committee can agree on the situation. You can have UN resolution drafting that, Ukraine moving towards Europe prompted Russia to, invade, and the pro-Ukraine side can write that Russia invaded in an unprompted way. So the preamble can set up a different situation. If we're right now dealing with heart disease or, the Ebola virus, the preamble of Switzerland can be the Ebola virus is very, very deadly in, different parts of Africa. And we also recognize that it doesn't really transfer to cold countries. And we also affirm that the global community should pay for their local diseases and not do this on a global scale. And we can then see clauses saying that the UN shouldn't necessarily be funding this virus. Like, that's also a possibility. So setting up the situation of this committee is focusing on the wrong thing, or this committee, is taking a certain direction. Even, by the way, if we all agree that Ebola is a terrible virus, or, the coronavirus, are we researching? Like, the terrible virus can result in closing borders or upping research or opening borders and treating people wherever they are. Like, there are many different possibilities. So it's something to keep in mind that the preambles can tell different stories, but at the same time, blocks should agree on, a bunch of countries agree on what their stories are so that they can all work together in the same document that comes from that. Just make sure whatever block you are that your preambles, lead to that type of logical conclusion. So case-specific information can be deeply concerned about the threat of famine and global humanitarian needs presently facing millions of people in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is which country?
North Korea.
Beautiful. Okay, so we can see that. Now, first of all, don't use adjective examples, which we talked about again. Deeply concerned that the war, actually, let's have someone else read this. Let's go with who didn't read yet. Egypt, UNODC. Can you please read?
Don't use adjectives examples. Deeply concerned that the war between Ukraine and Russia will expand into Europe, and in such case, Russia could use nuclear weapons, and it is important that EU countries have means to defend themselves.
Okay. Anyone, please tell me what what are the adjectives? What is the part that doesn't need to be here?
Deeply concerned.
No, deeply
It is
concerned.
important.
Okay. Okay, it is important the EU countries have the means to defend themselves, right? That isn't inherently part of the war expanding clause. Anyone else? Anything else? If our idea is to say we're concerned about the war to some extent, what part does not need to be here?
Russia could use nuclear weapons.
Very good. Okay, excellent. So you're both correct. Deeply concerned that the war between Ukraine and Russia will expand into Europe. Okay, the and in such a case and already is new ideas. Okay, so this is three different clauses that were pushed into one with descriptive language. Now again, could we be concerned about any of these things? Yes, but they're not inherently connected. Use of nuclear weapons doesn't mean we're expanding into Europe. They could all be correct, but they shouldn't be pushed into one clause. You want the clauses to be separate. Okay, so here it should be deeply concerned that Russia will expand and nuclear weapons could be used. Could be separate clauses, but definitely without emotionally eliciting language. Okay, so that's describe the situation as accurately as you can and just show it in fact, saying recognizing, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people misplaced, tens of thousands dead, give the exact number, like we talked about exact numbers, and that'll move you through. Okay, legal right. A legal right is an interest accepted and protected by law. Different countries have different legal rights. For example, recognizing Article 25, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. This is a right that can show North Koreans have a right to food. Okay, so you want to find in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you can usually find a right that supports what you want to do, because oftentimes in MUN, the situation is two rights contradicting each other, and you have to decide who is more right, within the rights and what to do. Finally, so that's with rights. Just find something, stick one there, especially for your first MUNs. This is not as important. I've rarely seen committees get into such a legalistic discussion that it's like, okay, well, it's Article 12 versus Article 17, and that's where the debate is. It's usually about practical on-the-ground implications using data of what's happening. Supporting materials are used to support your main points and give them more credibility. There are many possibilities, can be previous treaties, can be quotes from politicians, statistical data, and anything else that strengthens the resolution would fall into this category. Okay, so for example, let's have someone read who didn't read yet. ECOSOC Spain, you didn't read. Read.
Yeah, recalling the joint declaration of the Korean Peninsula of 1993, signed by North Korea and South Korea on the
denuclearization,
which includes establishment of pledge, not the processed nuclear reprocessing and uranium
enrichment
facilities.
All right. So we see here that, finish up.
We see here relevant past document. Wait a minute. We see here relevant past document we can use to show there was agreement in the past.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, ECOSOC Spain. So we see here recalling a declaration in 1993 of North and South Korea committing on denuclearization and the pledge not to possess nuclear processing and enrichment facilities. What does it show? That there was a treaty in the past. So if we want to make a new treaty in the future, we can say, hey, remember, there was such a treaty in the past. This is an example of a previous legal document. You can also say, recognizing that in 2017, over 2 million people were malnourished, same thing. That is a past supporting material, actually in 2017, no, but if you talk about, let's say, the famine in the 90s or something like that. So that's the idea. So describe the case, I guess, to review the types of preambulatory clauses, information about specific case, a legal right, and supporting materials. Okay, all important. But again, don't spend a ton of time on them. The operative clause is where it's going to be at. That's what you're going to do. That's what's most important. After formatting. What does a draft resolution look like? Okay. Right. So the draft resolution is the following order. Your chairs should probably give you a template. I will also post a template. As soon as I'm done the recording, just like remind me the articles I need to put into the chat. Okay. So some committees have templates that you can take a document and make a copy and then edit. Some places you need to make your own from scratch, but the idea is basically to follow this format: the committee name, sponsors and signatories. Sponsors are the main writers, signatories are supporters. Your chairs will elaborate on this as well. By the way, there's no shame in being a signatory or even a sponsor on more than one document. You usually don't have the time, but you can be on as many as you want. Then you write the topic, your preambulatory clauses, your operative clauses, and then details. A draft resolution is going to look something like this. It may seem small for some of us on our screens, but if we look through the committee, Security Council, topic, sponsors, signatories, by the way, they're in alphabetical order, the topic, and then United Nations Council. We can see the operative clauses don't have numbers. They're all pressed to the left of the margins. And then that's the preambulatory clauses. And the operative clauses start with a number and go down into subclauses and bullet points. So it needs to look something a little bit, faster than we would ideally like, but I think we cover all of the important bases. So for one final time, does anyone have questions on any of this?
Yeah, just one thing. If just in case for this one, when you read it out in like the final voting session, do you just have to read exactly what it says in the paper, or can you say it in a more interesting way?
No, you have to read exactly what it is. Usually, there's something called a panel of authors, which lets the writers then after they've read like first you have to read the exact text. That's what you're voting on. Then you have a place to freely explain in human speak what it is you wrote and why it's a big deal. But first and foremost, you need to read the exact text. That's what people are voting on. And it's important that is read out, because theoretically I could say, hey, here's 20 clauses. All I'm saying is that we should get donuts. Let's all vote for this. You like donuts? Great. We all vote for donuts. And then we find that we're actually going to be using all of the nuclear weapons in the world to blow up Australia. So surprise. So yeah, it's definitely important to read the not support that idea. I just showing the difference between donuts and Australia. Yes. Any other questions?
I don't know. I'm right now busy trying to stay sane and just sort of figure out I'm trying to figure out what people are thinking and feeling and whatever.
But everyone, this is Alvin. She's a MUN super advisor with, I don't know how many tens of graduates.
Kids in my school. My students.
Robin, is there a specific comment?
Whatever.
All right. So that's going to wrap it up for our MUN resolutions class. Does anyone have any?
Sorry, after this is the rules
How's
of
it
procedure,
looking?
right?
After what?
After this block of time, there's the rules of procedure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Asaf will start presenting and
Okay.
and then we have all the committees in the breakout rooms, and there will be chairs or academics or secretariat answering the questions, but mainly the aim is to practice the ROPS and
Okay.
to simulate the committee, kind of. Yeah.
Italy, you have a question?
Yeah, it's not related to resolutions.
Okay, wonderful.
But in double delegation, when we need to vote on a resolution or something, both people vote, so we have two plaques and two votes, or we have one vote?
You have one vote.
Thank you.
It's
Also,
one country, one
there's-
vote.
There's another question about resolutions are only done outside the committee in a double delegation room. Otherwise, you need, unless your chairs let you, should be in the committee. There's no resolution work, like resolution work is done during the unmods. When it's not an unmod, you're not working on a resolution. You can on your computer from your seat, but you can't walk around and move around. It's not like the committee is now in a mod or general speakers list and you can walk outside and work on the draft. So if you want to work on the resolution, that is during, you vote for an unmod, and then everyone does in your committee rooms. Only double delegations have the option to have two spaces. It can be outside, it can be in another classroom, but that's already defined. And by the way, double delegations have usually an extra chair or someone who can watch the outside, so they're aware of what's going on. In regular committees with 2 chairs or 3 chairs, all eyes should be on the room, and you need that many more people. All right, so that's it for me. I posted the articles that I said I would into the chat. I want to wish everyone a very productive final days of preparation before this very exciting conference coming up. And I look forward to seeing everyone at AtidMUN 10, very exciting, next week. Thank you, Bronya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel.